So creating a new entry in our products table is pretty similar to our registration page and using a form obviously to get user input. So I'm going to copy and paste our form from our registration page and then adjust it as necessary. I'm going to put it above our results so it appears up here between the user logged in information and the table there. So I'm going to put it there. And the indentation's gone a bit whack, but that's all right. Enter, sorry, I'm going to say save or update product details below. We're going to have a form. It can probably be set to get because there's no sensitive information. We don't need an account type, don't need a confirm password. Let's call our button save because that's what it does initially before we turn it into a update button. Don't need that. All right. We don't need to get the product ID because if you look at our database structure of our products table, the product ID should be auto-incrementing as far as I know, which means we don't actually need to manually enter it, and you probably don't want the user doing that anyway. Yep, set to auto-increment, so that's good. First thing we need is product name, 2 words. And let's call that one product name like it appears in the database. We'll say here, into product name perhaps, or actually let's leave that blank. Let's not tell the user what to do in this case. They're a staff member, they should know how to use this. What's the next one? Supplier ID. Name that like it's named in the database. Delete the placeholder. Just check that's working so far. Yep, it's working so far. All right, let's make this easier. And category ID. Unit, not unit ID. Oops. What else do we need? Price, they can enter the price, I'm sure, with no trouble. Oops, what am I doing? Pressing buttons, wrong buttons. Quantity, they can edit the quantity. So this is just remember to allow the user or the staff member user to edit what is in the database without having to be a database administrator. Let's test that. So there's our form for creating a new product, which I demonstrated in the first video in this little part of our extended series. So now we need some PHP to actually process what the user has entered in the form, which, as you know, we can get from our registration page. Okay, so this is what we need. I think that matches up. Nope. That matches up. And let's paste that in at the top under our login scripts to boot them out if they're not a staff member, remember. So user click save in this case, and it's save. Now, do we want staff members to clean up their HTML input in the form? Why would staff members want to perform things like SQL injection? They wouldn't. So I'm going to delete it. All of it. And don't need that, let's say product saved or created, same thing. Oops. Product created, if they've done that, let's leave it as SQL insert. We'll fix that up in a minute. Do we need to validate that they've entered everything? Probably. So let's go ahead and do that. We don't need to check if there's maybe need to check if there's a product already. I'm not going to. You can if you like. You should know how to do that by now, hopefully. So let's say if, all right, let's get rid of that one. We don't need to match. So let's say if empty, we need some variables to store what's in the form actually. And we'll call them product name. So you can see I like to use camel case for variable names, and usually I also use it for names of HTML form controls. But in this case, as you'll see later, there'll be another HTML form that we might need to differentiate the name from. So that's why that is like that at the moment. So that's equal to request. It's called product name, isn't it? Okay. So this is a little tedious. Feel free to skip through. What I'm doing is just getting everything that the user has entered in the form and storing it in a variable with camel case, so that we can process it easily. Or, for example, check if they've entered it all. Category ID. Probably would have been easier just to use the original way of writing it, but it's all right. Unit price quantity. Unit is equal to unit. I think, is it lowercase? No, it's uppercase. Whoops. Price and the quantity. Oops. Price. As quick as we can, which is not that quick. Quantity. Okay, so now we're checking if these variables are empty, or what they've entered in the form is empty. And if it is, we want to tell them to enter data. Now the reason for that is that we don't want the database to get all whack. If there's some fields with missing data, for example, it might cause us issues in the future. Let's just create a bit of white space there. Please complete all fields. Let's get rid of the validate email a bit. So else they do complete all fields, then we can execute this query, which we actually will delete and rewrite. So we'll leave it as empty quotes for the moment. And just comment that out. Test things before we go any further. Hit save. Please complete all fields. Good, that works. It's not in the best spot, obviously next to the login information. But we'll fix that in a minute. Okay, so let's write our SQL query. Now, I usually, as I said previously, do it in MySQL first, just to make sure I've got the right SQL query and it works, because as I said previously, it doesn't always give you an error. Sometimes it just doesn't work and doesn't tell you why. So let's do that in here, and then we'll copy it in just to make sure it works. Insert into. You can use these buttons here, but I don't like to because they have funny quotes. Insert into our products table in these columns and these values. Columns are product name. Remember, we don't need to insert into the product ID. It's auto increment. Category ID, unit, price, and quantity. So they're our fields we're inserting into. Our values, TAM-TIMs, again, they're back. That should be in quotes because it's a varchar data type for product name field. Supplier ID, let's try 20. It doesn't need to be in quotes because it's a number or an integer. Category ID 1, I'm just guessing that. Unit should be in quotes because it's a varchar. Price can be a double or a decimal number. And quantity, let's put 99 boxes of TAM-TIMs. Everyone likes TAM-TIMs. Let's press go and hopefully that works. Yes, it works. Awesome. Let's just make sure that's in there and looks okay before we go and put it in PHP and test it on our web application. Okay, that's all good. I'm going to delete that now, I think. Yep. Okay, here's our SQL query in PHP. Obviously, I need to replace these values here with what's in our form. So I'm going to do that by plugging those in with and without their quotes. And if all goes to plan, we can create new products from the front end of the web application, which is great if you're a staff member who has little idea how to develop a web application or use database in the back. Okay, that looks pretty good. Time to test it. Let's just go back to our base CRUD page and test it with our TAM-TIMs again. Hit save, product created. Sounds like it worked. And you can see when we use get for our form method, it appears in the URL, which is in contrast to post. It won't appear there. Let's just make sure it's in MySQL. Eventually. Really slow today. That's not what I want to do. I want to go to the end. Jeez, it's super slow. Come on. Come on, Optus. And there it is there. So that's working. Great. In case you're wondering why I've used variables here to store what's in the form as opposed to simply copying it in directly to say there or into our values down here, I've found that the quotes cause issues. You can do it that way by copying it directly, but I just find it's a bit easier and neater to use variables. So I'd encourage you to do the same, but if you find it works, it's fine as well. I won't mark it any differently. We also need to close our connection to the database, don't we? So where should we do that? Let's do that after it executes this first. MySQLi close, and that is connection closing so that we don't leave a lingering connection to the database. Now, if we close the connection there, we need to reopen it because we're using it again down here. If we use the built-in function include once, it's only going to include the database once in our file, so it needs to be include. Or you can use require. The difference being that include will just throw, if there's an error, it'll throw a warning and continue executing the PHP. Require, conversely, will stop execution. So we'll include it there. And we're also going to need to include it when we use it again down here. So I'll chuck that in there. And once again, we'll close it when we're finished using it, because that's what you would be expected to do as a developer. And let's just test it. You can see there I was looking that up just to make sure I was all over the theory before I told you about it. And it looks like it's working. Excellent. See you in the next one.